I stumbled upon the haunted boots from the deep web, and now they're tormenting my dreams. I never should have opened that door. I felt a chill, an odd sense of foreboding as I clicked through the links, each more bizarre than the last. The deeper I went, the darker it got. I thought I was just browsing the dark corners of the internet, curious, reckless, maybe a little bored. But then I found those boots. They were worn, scuffed, and oddly beautiful in a way that made my skin crawl. Black leather, twisted around the thick soles as if they had a life of their own. The seller swore they were cursed, a relic from some sinister event. My heart raced with excitement and dread at the thought. I bought them on impulse, smirking at the warning labels, wiping the sweat from my clammy palms. Once they arrived, I placed them in my closet, a hidden door to a realm I never wanted to visit. I went about my days, normal and mundane. But as night fell, the atmosphere shifted. The moonlight seeping through the curtains grew sinister, twisting shadows dancing on the walls. The air turned thick, heavy with whispers I couldn't understand. I shivered, pulling the covers tight around me. And then the noises began. Soft at first, like the rustle of fabric. Then louder, a scraping sound that sent chills racing down my spine. My heart pounded. I lay still, listening. The room felt wrong. I could almost smell the dampness that clung to the corners of my mind, eerie and cold. Objects shifted on their own in my peripheral vision. My breath quickened. What was happening? I glanced at the closet, almost daring it to reveal its secrets. Panic clutched at my throat. I felt something watching me, an unshakable sensation that pricked at the edges of my sanity. Suddenly, out of the murky shadows, a figure emerged. It was hunched, cloaked in darkness, with those damn boots planted firmly on the ground. I froze, my feet glued to the mattress. The air crackled, thick with fear. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body betrayed me. I never should have opened that door. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. I woke up drenched in sweat, gasping for breath as daylight crept timidly into the room. The terror of that figure haunted me, lingering like a shadow that refused to dissipate. I had tossed and turned, plunged into a fitful sleep that offered no refuge. My heart raced as memories of its menacing form stabbed at my consciousness, the way those damn boots had clawed at the edges of my dream. Rubbing my face, I willed myself to shake off the remnants of the nightmare. Yet, deep in my gut, an unsettling dread festered. I tried to convince myself it was just a figment of my imagination, trickery born from late-night folly. But as I shuffled into the kitchen, the enticing aroma of breakfast did little to quell the cold knot tightening in my stomach. I glanced at the closet, still bathed in shadows. A faint whisper ghosted through my mind. Droplets of dread splattered like raindrops against my senses. I found myself compelled to walk toward it. The inexplicable weight of the boots beckoned me, even if I despised the pull. I gripped the knob, feeling its chill bite into my palm, an electric hum that coursed through my veins. But just as I opened it, a guttural sound erupted from within, an unmistakable thud, the sound of boots dragging against the wooden floor. I staggered back, clutching my chest. My mind raced in frantic circles, searching for reasons to rationalize the horror pulsing through the air. I was alone, after all. There were no boots, no figure creeping forth from the darkness. I heard laughter, high-pitched and mocking, cutting through the silence like a knife. My knees buckled as I slumped against the wall, eyes riveted on the closing closet door, that seemed to breathe. The space felt alive, pregnant with terror. Every creak echoed a threat as the darkness whispered promises of dread. Who had been laughing? Moments stretched into an eternity, until finally I gathered the courage to approach the door again, heart thumping madly. I opened it slowly, bracing myself for whatever lay beyond. The closet was empty, just clothes, empty space, and yet I could still hear the laughter ringing in my ears, taunting me. The chilling distinctiveness of the boots still lingered, like a phantom forged from my own imagination. Days passed, and I found myself trapped in a cycle of sleepless nights and hollow days. The whispers grew louder, spurring me to obsess over the boots. I avoided looking directly at them, always feeling their presence weighty and oppressive. I glimpsed them only occasionally, their sinister allure overshadowed by the warnings in my mind. Do not touch. Do not disturb. Yet I was drawn to them, like a moth to flame. Then, one evening, I braved the darkness. With my fingertips trembling, I reached for the boots, hesitating just before contact. A flash of cold shot up my arm, jolting me back. But ambition seized me. I had to know. As I slipped my fingers onto the leather, the air around me thickened, and the temperature plummeted. An intense wave of sorrow washed over me, crashing against my soul like an unending tide. Emerging from the shadows of imagination, the cloaked figure appeared once more, standing before me with nothing but anguish swirling in its depths. I fell to my knees, terror swallowing me whole. Its eyes burned bright, two embers of despair sinking into my own. Before I could scream, it took a step forward, the calculated crunch of its boot echoing through my veins, and then, just before I lost all sense of reality, a voice sliced through the air, my own, but twisted and warped in a way that made my skin crawl. You sought the darkness, now welcome it. As the last word reverberated in my mind, I felt the cold hand of the figure guide my head to the shadows of the closet. My surroundings blurred, and just as everything faded to black, the laughter erupted again, echoing, mocking, promising a new nightmare to unravel. I was not trapped in my own mind. It was becoming a prison of horrors. My heart stopped as a new horror dawned upon me. Maybe the figure wasn't just feeding off my fear. Maybe it wanted something. And perhaps what it saw was already inside me. The darkness surged forward, wrapping around me, merging my thoughts with the laughter until I couldn't tell where it ended and I began. The first light of dawn filtered weakly through the curtains, but I could feel deeper shadows within the room, ones that seemed to seep from the very corners of my mind. My heart pounded as I struggled to separate the remnants of dreams from reality. The laughter echoed in the silence, its resonance fading but never fully disappearing. The boots still lay in the closet, a dark promise lurking beneath their polished surface. At lunch, I tried to distract myself with mundane tasks, the dishes, the laundry, but with each clean plate stowed away, a gnawing terror clawed its way back up. The laughter bubbled in my chest like an impending storm, threatening to overflow and drown me. I couldn't shake that warped voice, the one that had taunted me, reminding me of some unfathomable nightmare I had yet to uncover. With every passing day, I felt pieces of myself slipping away, morphing into something distinctly shadowed. As twilight drew near one evening, the shadows became prominent, creeping along the walls, winding around the furniture like ethereal hands reaching for me. With each whisper in the still air, I felt the atmosphere grow heavy, charged with a palpable dread that sent chills skittering down my spine. I couldn't stay away from the closet any longer. The figure's presence had entrenched itself in my psyche, becoming a parasite gnawing at my sanity. Gripped by an unbearable compulsion, I swung open the closet door once more. The boots waited, their glimmer somehow sinister in the dim light. Against my better judgment, I slid my fingers down their cold leather, preparing myself for the surge of emotion and fear I had experienced before. Instead, the moment I touched them, a shockwave of memories jolted through me, sweeping me away like a riptide. Suddenly, I was soaring through fragmented moments, faces of people I recognized yet didn't know. Cries for help echoed in a distant void, voices muffled and pleading. A flicker of a child's laughter darkened into screams, and each snapshot twisted into a garbled cacophony of despair. I saw reflections in shattered glass, menacing figures emerging from dry shadows, their eyes wide with despair. And through it all, the figure appeared amidst the chaos, its anguished form a constant fact, drawing strength from their torment as if their suffering served a purpose. I snapped back, flinging the boots away. They tumbled with a dull thud, the sound a harsh contrast to the silent horror still flooding my mind. I staggered back, breathless and drenched in cold sweat. Had I just glimpsed my own fate? Or had I entered the lives of those that the figure had tormented before me? The suffocating terror clawed at my heart. I needed to escape, to forget, but as I spun for the door, a presence loomed behind me. A cold wind whipped my hair back, and I turned slowly, dread pooling in my stomach like lead. The air thickened with whispered promises. My heart dropped as I saw the figure once more, its shadows stretching menacingly across the room, a grotesque silhouette formed by every memory of anguish it collected. But then, something shifted. My own face reflected back at me through those glowing eyes, twisted, morphed into something unrecognizable. "Help me," I whispered, the words slipping from my mouth before sanity could intervene. It took a step closer, the thud of its boot a macabre metronome beating in time with my frantic pulse. Suddenly, the figure pointed towards the closet, the laughter morphing into a symphony of voices, all pleading for attention. I felt myself being drawn toward its beckoning finger, each heartbeat tethering me closer to that abyss of darkness. "Join us, be part of the symphony." My arms moved, of their own accord, drawing me nearer, as if I were but a marionette controlled by the darkest thread. Reality twisted around me. The figure's glowing eyes bore into my soul. The weight of collective suffering pressed down on me, igniting a chilling fire in my veins. Just as I reached the threshold of the closet, the lights flickered violently, plunging the room into a darkness more suffocating than before. I felt the icy grip of the entity reach out, wrapping around me tightly, my breath quickening in terror. Suddenly, the closet door slammed shut behind me, trapping me in its suffocating embrace. The laughter crescendoed, a cacophony resonating inside my skull, drowning out my screams. It was no longer just a tormentor. It was a part of me now, a dark seed planted deep within my heart, and I could feel its roots beginning to intertwine with my very essence. Then everything went silent, the laughter fleeting into the void, leaving me alone in a profound darkness, swallowed by a terror that promised to reveal the true nature of my existence. I tried to scream, to escape, to wake up, but instead, I felt the darkness pull tighter, wrapping its cold tendrils around my mind until it all began to blur and fade. And then, a chilling whisper crept through the abyss. "You had one last chance now, there's no going back." My breath caught, slack with realization, as I felt the shape of the closet pulse around me, alive and hungry, a door that could very well lead to an infinite hell. Chapter: The deepening abyss. The silence was oppressive, a fabric that pressed against my skin, constricting around me like a ravenous serpent. I felt the pulse of the closet emanating ominously, a sinister heartbeat syncing with the frantic rhythm of my own. My surroundings blurred, and every ounce of reason frayed at the edges, slipping into a gnarled chaos I was too terrified to understand. Moments passed, or were they eternities, when the darkness shimmered, suddenly vivid with grotesque visions. Flashes flickered before my eyes, a dimly lit alley, a frantic figure sprinting with something clutched in their hands, only to be tackled to the ground. I willed myself to look away, but the scene rooted me in place, and I was helpless to avoid the swelling dread that consumed me. The laughter returned, this time amalgamated with cries of anguish, and each note of that twisted melody clawed through my mind, an insistent echo. "Join us, be part of the symphony." The beckoning grew louder, and with each jarring beat, images collided into a dreadful montage. I could see the fleeting faces of tortured souls pawned in desperation, each overlaying another, all impossibly familiar yet shadowed by the weight of shared fear. I had glimpsed their terror through the boots, and now their despair was seated within me, swirling deeper as the closet pulsated, its insatiable hunger begging to imprison forever those without hope. Frantic thoughts darted through my mind, desperately searching for an escape. What did it mean to be part of the symphony? Would I too be distorted into a lament of another forgotten existence? Suddenly, sharp fingers of icy air wrapped around me, the phantom touch like shards of glass breaking through my sanity. With every breath, the air thickened, curling into tendrils that wrapped around my throat, threatening me with silence. I pressed my eyes shut, trying to will my way out of this nightmarish realm, trying to find a remnant of light. Out of sheer will, I forced my lids apart, only to encounter a darkness more profound than before. "Don't look," a voice whispered, a honeyed echo laced with malice. I couldn't help it. My gaze snapped downward to the floor. A sharp glint caught my eye, and in an instant, I was starkly aware that the boots had vanished from view, yet their presence lingered, more palpable than before. I could feel the sinister embrace tightening around me, compressing the very essence of my being as if I were nothing more than a vessel, drained nothing but a conduit for the twisted energies lingering in the void. Then, through the unsettling quiet, the closet began to shift and morph, its material transforming into pulsating flesh, writhing in response to an unseen pulse. Gripped by an unspeakable terror, I staggered back, my body colliding against an unseen barrier as it encircled me, the darkness alive with fervor. Images of the faces buried in the folds of the shadows leapt forth. They twisted, moaned, and writhed, a nightmarish collective. Each face bore anguish, their mouths silently screaming like distant sirens haunting the very essence of my soul. "Plea bargain," I thought desperately. "They must desire something, they must." Suddenly, a cold laugh echoed within the chaos, sharp and mocking. "You think you can bargain with us?" The voice layered itself over whispers, invading my mind with venomous intent. "Your torment is just beginning. You belong to us now." The images began to merge, faces melting into grotesque forms, with elongated limbs clawing desperately at the edges of reality. I felt a rush of air, thin as paper, swipe past me before a flash of brilliant light erupted within the closet's maw. The figure returned, no longer a shadow, but a specter of my own nightmares tethered to an impossibly real essence. It loomed nearer, hand outstretched, and fear gripped me with tendrils of ice. I shook my head vigorously, my mouth open to scream, but only a soft gasp escaped as I felt my own resolve flicker. Then it spoke once more. An echo of fractured memories collided with my own. "You want to just witness their suffering. You will join it, be reborn through agony. Bow to the voice, sing their lament in a choir of despair." With my heart languidly sinking into the abyss, I made a final plea for release, yet deep down, I realized I was already attuned to the horrific cadence of that symphony. The air shimmered again, swirling with indescribable terror, and everything fell into silence once more. Just as I thought I could hear the silence above my own heart, the closet split open with an earth-shattering crack, exposing a blinding light that surged forth, crashing into my world like thunder. And then, with one piercing cry that resonated through me like a bell, a cacophony of despair spilled forth from the closet, a flood of anguished souls screaming in unison as spectral hands reached for me, drawing me into a vortex of claustrophobic darkness. My last coherent thought was a spine-chilling realization. Perhaps the final remnants of my twisted self would never escape this fate. The shadows were eagerly awaiting to collect another fragment of my soul. As they propelled me forward into that blinding light, I was left with one final dread-inducing murmur echoing in my mind: "Welcome home." Walls of shadow tightened around me, pulsing with a rhythm that felt both sinister and expectant. The blinding light from the closet had swallowed me whole, warping reality into something grotesque, a realm of imagination twisted by nightmares untold. I found myself, inexplicably, standing in what appeared to be a ghostly replica of my own room, but everything was muted, submerged in an unsettling gray hue that made the familiar seem utterly alien. The boots were back, more vivid this time, stacked neatly by my bed, glimmering enticingly as if they were crashing waves pulling me towards a siren's song. The air carried a faint whisper of their allure, a cool, metallic scent that mocked my sanity. My heart raced as I began to advance towards them, the curiosity gnawing at my insides, desperate to touch the foreign allure of their leather. With each step, the floor creaked beneath me, not my familiar hardwood, but something damp and fibrous, as if it exhaled my hallowed breath. An unsettling chill enveloped my skin, sparking memories of the closet. A sensation tangling itself over my shoulders, like a heavy cloak, opening doors of thoughts long buried. What if they chose me? What would I become? Not yet. That same honeyed voice lilted in my mind, sultry and serpentine, igniting a feardrum beyond comprehension. The light was fading, seeping from the corners of this realm I had stumbled into. I turned my attention back to the boots, the fascination clawing at me, and reached them with shaking hands. The leather felt impossibly warm, alive, even a pulse softly thrumming beneath my fingertips. I recoiled instinctively, yet could not pull away from the sheer gravity of their leftward glance. From beneath, soft sylph-like whispers crawled forth. Wear us, they beckoned, and everything you fear will dance at your command. A nightmarish chorus erupted around me, echoes bouncing off forlorn surfaces. Images flooded into my mind. Shadowy figures swirled, their cries weaving into a haunting symphony that enveloped me. I could barely make out their features, blurred, twisted, mouths echoing screams that blended seamlessly with the cacophony trembling in the ether. They yearned for peace, for release, yet knew their penance would forever bind them within this distorted plane. Fists clenched, I planted my feet firmly against the floor, each moment feeling like an eternity. Get away from me! I screamed into the void, my voice splintered, but the sound barely scratched the surface of the overwhelming noise. Too late. The presence taunted, rising from the chaos and curling around me like smoke. You are already entwined in their fate. You are one of us. In that instant, I understood these boots didn't merely belong to the forgotten. They were tethered to me, imprinted on my essence. A crack of thunder roared and flung open the spaces of this warped entity, revealing slivers of nightmarish landscapes beyond a garden under an oppressive sky, flowers blooming out of anguished faces, all lost inside the very same struggle that had claimed me. Just as my resolve began to tremble, a chilling figure emerged from the shadows, draped in a shroud of darkness, shifting seamlessly through the void like smoke through air. It wasn't a reflection of my nightmares, but rather an embodiment of rage, grief, and despair. The figure extended an elongated hand, whispering, "You wish to belong? This is your calling." I felt the floor beneath me shifting again, a bubbling cauldron of fear rising as I clutched the boots tighter. The world spun. The walls whispered secrets of betrayal and death, dragging me deeper into the pit of my own madness. The presence around me thickened, suffocating and intoxicating, teasing the edges of my mind. With a final surge of adrenaline, I released the boots and stumbled back, my heart clamoring in my chest as reality shifted once more. Just outside my grasp, shadows deepened, reaching out with desperate fingers, clawing at the remnants of what I once knew. I turned to flee, but the shadows swarmed, tightening around my body, pulling me back toward the emptiness. And then I saw it, the closet door in the distance flinging wide open again, bathing the room in that same blinding light, more radiant and monstrous than before. My limbs felt heavy, as if the very essence of dread had taken root, and through the luminous doorway, I glimpsed the faces of long-lost souls reaching for me, their anguished eyes wide with a desperate knowing. "Join us!" they cried in unison, voices overlapping in an ear-piercing crescendo, resonating with a raw, haunting urgency that pulled at my heartstrings. Every ounce of logic drove me to flee, yet something hidden within whispered, "Welcome home." Just as I turned to run, a cold, fresh breeze enveloped me, swirling through the chaos, and in that moment, my foot slipped. I stumbled, falling forward, unseeing, plunging straight into the shroud of penetrating light, leaving behind the already crumbling walls of reality. I was cast into a pitch-black void, hearing not the echoes of that nightmarish choir, but rather the pressing silence screaming in my ears. I felt the culmination of hopelessness settle in like a thick fog, then a single, distant whisper broke through, mocking yet familiar, echoing in my mind as my surroundings fell into an abyss. "Welcome back." The cold shock of silence enveloped me, an absence so suffocating that I felt as though I were being submerged in a sea of oblivion. The faces of the lost souls faded, yet their anguished cries echoed relentlessly in my mind, tugging at the frayed threads of my sanity. Floating in that endless dark, my thoughts spiraled outward, searching for a tether to reality. But the void offered nothing, no warmth, no light. For an instant, I felt weightless, as if I were drifting between realms, suspended by the specters I had glimpsed moments ago. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm me, a warm breeze swept through, seeming to whisper secrets only it could understand. Suddenly, the weightless feeling cracked like glass beneath my feet, and I felt no ground, no wall, just an endless chasm pulling me deeper into its recesses. Somewhere in that abyss, a flicker of light caught my eye, a murky glow that pulsed like a heartbeat, drawing me toward it. As I lurched toward the light, familiar memories clawed their way back. Cozy evenings in my room, the reassuring laughter of friends, and the mundane concerns of a life now eclipsed by terror. But those thoughts were shattered as shadows shape-shifted around me, curling their fingers around my consciousness, whispering sweet promises of what lay beyond. "Embrace the darkness." The voices cooed softly, seducing my sense of self, warping the remnants of my mind. Captivated by their call, I reached for the glow, and suddenly everything flashed, a raging inferno of tear-soaked faces, distorted bodies trapped in gruesome poses, like a nightmarish display of suffering. Each face was one I recognized, friends, family, even acquaintances from childhood, now frozen in terror, reaching out with elongated arms, pleading silently for my help. Then, piercing through the chaos, I heard an unmistakable voice, a voice I could never forget. It was my mother, her dulcet tones now twisted in anguish. "Help us, please! Don't let them take you too." The sight of her face, warped and corrupted by despair, drove a spear of pure agony through my heart. I staggered back, the pull of the light pulling taut and snapping like a fragile thread. I turned in panic, trying to flee from her anguished figure, but the shadows twisted and melded together, forming an impenetrable wall around me, squeezing tighter with each breath. Desperation clawed at my throat. "I want to stay," I shouted, the darkness resonating with my defiance. Then, like a cruel trick, the shadowy veil slackened enough to slip through. I tumbled blindly toward the beckoning glow. When I broke through, it was the familiar sight of my own room, but a twisted duplication bathed in that sickly gray light. Every surface undulated, morphing between dimensions, the floor rippling as if alive, and there it was, a mirror standing innocent and unassuming in the center of the chaos, yet under its sheen lay a world of dark secrets waiting to be unveiled. I was drawn to it, the pull visceral and magnetic, as if I were a moth to its wicked flame. "Look away," a voice cried within me, echoing the urgency of my mother's plea. Yet my legs betrayed me, propelled by an unseen force, until I stood mere inches from the glassy surface, my breath fogging up the reflected air. The reflections warped and twisted, not revealing my own face, but something far more sinister, cloaked figures with hollow, gaping eyes silently mouthing words I could not hear, their hands extending outward as if grasping for the warmth of my fleeting light. As I leaned in, the mirror began to ripple like water, Eerie images materialized scenes of torment where I became the architect of suffering. I watched helplessly as my hands dragged dirt-smeared faces into the dreaded bleakness, sealing their fates like an unwilling puppet master. The more I watched, the more I felt the icy fingers of guilt coiling around my throat. Just then, a loud crash echoed behind me as the shadows began to writhe violently, breaking free from their constraints like a caged beast. It was a chaotic storm of nightmares, howling and hissing as the very fabric of this tortured realm began to unravel. I realized I was alone. The boots, the cursed boots, I had so desperately resisted were now pulsating with a fierce energy at my feet, beckoning like seducing whispers. The moment I glanced downward, they flashed, but not the dark leather that had once enthralled me. They were soaked in blood, vivid and steaming, glistening with an otherworldly aura, pulsing with the heartbeat of those trapped within their fabric. No, no! I screamed, pushing away from the mirror. It felt like my very soul was being manacled to a haunting melody, towing the brink of eternity. Suddenly, the shadows roared with fury, as if enraged at my defiance. Just as I turned to escape, the room quaked, collapsing inward like a dying star. The boots flickered ominously and, with one sharp inhale, I felt their pull more tangible than ever, as if they were the epicenter of this supernatural storm. One last heartbeat echoed through the crumbling abyss, and I found myself suspended in midair, teetering on the edge of oblivion. In that instant, a terrible realization hit me. The choice could no longer remain mine. And then, the voices crashed together in a furious tempest, unrelenting. You can't escape. I opened my mouth, ready to scream, when the ground below me vanished entirely. I plummeted into the whirlpool of shadow, the wicked leather boots dancing just out of reach. The laughter rose in a crescendo, piercing the veil of chaos, stronger than any fear I had ever known. The last thing I saw was a swirling void below, a mouth of darkness yawning wide, ready to welcome me home. But in that moment, I glimpsed a hand extending towards me from the depths, a clawed, spectral hand, blackened and stained with the essence of the lost. The grip of fear tightened around my heart as I realized who or what it was. The air was heavy with dread, the taste of fear sharp and metallic on my tongue as I plummeted deeper into the abyss, the echoes of the taunting voices tumbling around me like autumn leaves caught in a whirlwind. Time disintegrated. Seconds morphed into eons as I fell, the shadows coiling around my limbs, clinging like a shroud determined to pull me down into their murky depths. The spectral hand below, clawed and ghastly, seemed more familiar with each passing heartbeat, every pulse of darkness drawing me closer to its gaping maw. A flicker of recognition ignited within my mind, illuminating a flickering truth buried beneath layers of fear. It belonged to one of the faces in the mirror, a face that had silently screamed as I dragged it into that wretched void. No, not again! I gasped, grasping at the remnants of my own identity, as if it might buoy me back to reality. But the voices grew louder, maddening whispers that coiled around me, spilling secrets from the depths. Join us, they urged, seductive yet sinister, every syllable laced with an ironclad inevitability. Shadows surged, replacing the air around me with their cold breath, and I could feel them slithering over my skin as if to envelop my very essence. Then, a sudden jolt ripped through the darkness. I found myself crashing into a floor that shouldn't have existed, bare and splintered, yet imbued with a sickly warmth that pulsed like a heartbeat beneath my fragile weight. All around, the void had dissolved into a warped version of my childhood home, the familiar halls now twisted, leading deeper into shadows lurking just out of sight. Run! A voice echoed, a desperate whisper that sliced through the cacophony of darkness, pulling me into a frenzied escape. I darted from room to room, the walls shifting as if they were alive, closing in on me with every step. Shapes loomed in the corners of my vision, figures with shadow-drenched features that mirrored the anguished faces I'd glimpsed earlier, hollow eye sockets staring dead into my soul. In a burst of clarity, I sprinted toward the light, that always seemed to beckon me, the hallway at the end of the corridor glowing with a promise of sanctuary. But with every heartbeat, the shadowy figures surged forward, their hands stretching out, clawing for the sliver of hope that I dared to reach for. Horrific cries erupted as each figure broke free from the walls, twisting and writhing, a macabre parade of lost souls eager to pull me down into their lamentations. Suddenly, the ground beneath me pulsated and fragmented, cracking like thin ice. I screamed as the familiar chill of the apparition-tinged boots surged up my legs, seeking to tether me to the chaos once more. Thousands of hands gripped my skin, pulling me back with insistent pressure. I instinctively fought against them, yanking my body forward, desperately reaching for the light. With one final push, I broke free from their grasp, but the moment was fleeting. The threshold of light transformed into shadow, swallowing the brightness whole. I stumbled through the blackness, now a shapeless corridor that led to an unfathomable void. Frantically, I searched for any sign of escape, but the darkness enveloped me, pulling me deeper into the nightmarish abyss where echoes of my mother's voice cut through the stillness, a haunting melody that made my heart ache. Cold fingers of despair tinged my thoughts, confounding my resolve. The ghosts of those who had pleaded for mercy flashed in my mind, their forms etched in vivid detail, friends from school, shattered family, and the faces of all those who fell victim to my presence, caught in the pulse of the boots that now throbbed with a vengeance. "Help us!" they cried, their voices intertwining into a singular chorus that resonated deep within my bones. I staggered, my heart racing, knowing I had to resist the call to save myself or risk dragging them all down forever. Terror gripped me as the shadows thickened ahead. They coalesced into a thick fog, ominous and pulsating as if alive, coiling with a sinister intent, ready to welcome me back into their suffocating fold. I pressed forward, determined to break through, but my breath quickened in despair. Every path led me back into the waiting arms of those desolate souls, trapped in an endless cycle of torment. Suddenly, a chill whirled around me, coiling tighter, a familiar weight in the air. And then, from within the swirling shadows, the distorted figure of my mother emerged, her face twisted in a grotesque mask of sorrow. "You have to choose, my love," she cried out, her words cracking like glass under pressure. "You can save us or save yourself." Before I could respond, her ghostly apparition stretched forth a hand, fingers trembling, urging me to fall into the darkness once more. I felt my body waver, the wicked boots thrumming wildly, drawing me towards her, to the dark choice that would define everything. But the moment lingered like a fragile thread about to snap. With the shadows closing in, a piercing shriek erupted from the depths, a scream that promised the worst of horrors yet to come, shattering my world of choices and expectations into irreversible chaos. And as I stood there, torn between light and shadow, the ground split open beneath me, revealing an abyss of swirling shadows, beckoning with a hungry, terrible appetite. "Choose now," the voice boomed, shattering the air with its urgency, before the ground tilted sharply, sending me hurtling toward the maw of darkness, the haunting forms of my past reaching out in an endless embrace. And into the depths I plunged, inching closer to the heart of darkness, where the only escape was through a terror far greater than I could ever comprehend. Cold darkness enveloped me as I fell, spiraling into the depths of an abyss filled with whispers and agonized wails that clawed at my sanity. The faces in the shadows morphed and shifted, each one etched with terror that mirrored my own. What had I awakened? The question roared through my mind like an unholy chant, drowning out the last remnants of hope. In a disjointed moment, I landed with a sickening thud, my body cracking against a stone floor that reverberated with a life of its own. The air was thick with the miasma of decay, and a chill swept through me, seeping into my bones. I crawled forward, the blackness pressing in like a vice, but even in the oppressive gloom, shapes began to take form, swirling around me in a dance of despair. With trembling hands, I traced the contours of the space around me, a chamber seemingly endless, dotted with flickering candles whose wispy flames flickered defiantly against the encroaching darkness. Their light illuminated grotesque murals on the walls, twisted images that depicted moments suspended in torment, memories I wished I could forget, all watching with a judgment that paralyzed me. A sudden movement caught my attention. Glimmers of light shattered the confines of the chamber, revealing a scurrying figure cloaked in shadow, darting between the candlelight. Fear coiled tight in my stomach as it drew closer, a ghastly semblance of a child, eyes sunken and gleaming with malice, a phantom of the innocence I had lost. "Help! Help us!" The child's voice was a musical whisper, honeyed yet venomous, beckoning me to follow. I shook my head, swallowing hard as the specter clawed at my arm, dragging me toward the intricate altar at the chamber's heart. The altar, engraved with ancient runes and bathed in dastardly crimson, was littered with offering bowls filled with what I could scarcely believe to be blood, fresh and glistening. It pulsed with a rhythm, a calling, a prayer, an invocation. "Join them. Become one," the specter cried, its voice fraying my resolve like old fabric. Panic surged through me. The ghostly child was dissolving into shadow, and yet I could see more of them skittering in all directions, their hollow eyes pleading for rescue that I could not provide. It was an awakening within me, a realization of all I had ignored, the lives I had led astray. "No!" I screamed, but the chorus of lost voices flooded my mind, drowning out any hope of escape. They were still there, lingering in the corners of my memory, their haunted faces fading in and out of view like old photographs. Each name whispered in the darkness cut deeper than the last, a macabre recitation that led back to me. "You walked over us," echoed a voice tinged with betrayal. "You left us." As the shadows thickened, a cacophony of gnashing teeth filled the air, sounds of distortion that resonated with the very core of my being. The ground quaked violently, and the figures began to slither from the walls, their forms stretching grotesquely in the flickering light, twisted by the madness of the emotions I had evoked. They converged around me, shadowy hands reaching out, clawing at my skin, grasping for something more than flesh. I felt myself slipping away, the familiar weight of the boots wrapping around my ankles, pulling me into the dark embrace of their spectral wrath. "You are ours," they hissed through jagged mouths, drawing the breath from my lungs. Just then, a shattering crack echoed through the chamber as a figure emerged from the shadows, a grotesque caricature of my mother. "You have to choose again," she rasped, her face a mixture of anguish and desperation, one hand clutching a bloodied offering as the altar throbbed beneath her. "Time is running out. They need you, or you'll be lost forever." My heart raced, torn between the chaos of my past and the agonizing choices it continuously forced upon me. In my confusion, I saw another spark of light flickering through the walls of the chamber, the tantalizing glow of a doorway long hidden, pulsating with promise. But as I reached out in desperate hope, the walls shook violently, the very air crackling with tension. The voices rose to a fevered pitch, a symphony of despair blurring into a deafening roar. "Choose! Choose! Choose!" Unseen hands gripped me, pulling me in every direction, battling for my loyalty between the child's sweet, betraying whispers and the haunting specter of my mother. And then, with a final surge, the shadows around me trembled and erupted into a vortex of swirling darkness, careening toward the doorway. I felt my body yanked violently in every direction, the desperate cries of the lost echoing through my mind, and like a puppet on a fraying string, I found myself teetering at the threshold. But just as I lunged toward the light, the apparition of my mother let out a bone-chilling scream as the altar split open, revealing a gaping maw beneath, beckoning me into the depths of despair. The shadows danced closer, hungry for my soul, while my heart thudded wildly in my chest. "Your choice will decide everything," she called, her voice barely breaking through the chaos as the light faded into oblivion, and with one last push, the shadows engulfed me, pulling me into the bottomless void where the cries of the lost became a deafening crescendo. All around me, the darkness writhed, spiraling into an inescapable nightmare, as I was left with one harrowing thought: what if there were no choices left to make? I woke up gasping, the air suffocating me like thick fog as I lay sprawled on an unyielding surface. The echoes of that abyss still rang in my ears, whispers softening into a terrifying stillness, leaving an even heavier weight pressing down on my chest. I was still in the chamber, still at the altar, but now the shadows had receded, leaving room for a new horror to creep in. I blinked against the dim light of the flickering candles, only to find myself surrounded by crumpled paper and scattered photographs strewn across the stone floor. They depicted faces I barely recognized, each framed in a portrait of despair, their eyes hollowed out and mouths twisted in silent screams. The names scrawled across the top of each snapshot suffocated me. Victims, lost souls, my past. With trembling hands, I reached for a nearby image, the familiar face sending a chill down my spine. It was Emily, the girl I had once promised to protect, whose laughter echoed like a ghost in my memory. Beneath her photograph was a date. She had vanished on the very night I had felt the haunting pull of those cursed boots. My heart raced, and I shoved the photo away, as though distancing myself from the crime I had unwittingly become part of. Suddenly, the air shifted, heavy with a presence that chilled me to the marrow. I sensed it before I saw it, a dark outline materializing from the shadows. The figure was cloaked in black, its features distorted, hanging somewhere between the familiar and the grotesque. Instinctively, I backed away, but a strange gravitational pull kept me rooted in place. "Did you think you could escape?" A voice hissed, a cruel imitation of my own, oozing malice and decay. "Every step you took led you deeper into the web. Your choices don't set you free, they chain you tighter." The figure stepped into the candlelight, revealing a face that was a hideous mockery of my own. Its eyes were fueled by starvation, an insatiable hunger that promised pain. I recoiled in horror, but it merely laughed, an echo reverberating around the chamber. "Welcome to your reflection, lost soul." The shadows coiled and twisted behind me, morphing into memories playing out like a gruesome reel. I saw Emily's face plunging from clarity into confusion, her cries dissolving into the silence of night as the boots' curse dragged her back into the darkness I could not comprehend. "You let them take me," she whispered in a voice heavy with betrayal, cerulean eyes wide and pleading. "You chose your own comfort over my life." "No!" I screamed, desperate to purge the weight of her accusations. "No! I tried, spare me your excuses." The creature spat, its voice a venomous hiss wrapping around my throat. "You are not the shepherd, you are the wolf. Come! Take a step closer, let them show you who you truly are." As if on command, the walls oozed with a grotesque fluid, alive with the faces of those I had wronged, their mouths plastered shut in desperation. I felt them clawing at the edges of my mind, forcing me to look deeper into the mirror. The figure cackled, a raucous celebration of my fatigue as it began to blur into a storm of shadows. "Join us." It beckoned, and in that moment, I felt the icy grip of despair wrapping around my heart. "The darkness waits for you. Embrace it, and be liberated from your futile choices." "No!" I gasped, fighting against the tide of despair. My mind raced with flashes of lost opportunities, the deep love I had for Emily, the promises I made, and the brutal truth of my past. But the shadows around me thickened, swirling with a relentless hunger, grasping at my ankles like the hands of the damned. As I stumbled back, searching for an escape, the photographs began to rearrange, flickering like a video unspooling. Their edges curled as if they were alive, images of me morphing into a cosmic jester, dancing in the ruin of others' agonies. Each face reflected my sins, warped in judgment, until finally revealing the deepest horror of all, my own. "Join them." Join us. The voices chorused, echoing around the chamber, blending into a chorus that became deafening. The altar trembled as I felt the weight of every choice I had avoided crashing upon me, each impossibility coiling tighter, constricting until I could barely breathe. In a final surge of desperation, I lunged back toward the altar just as it erupted with a violent burst of energy, sending ancient runes spiraling into the air, illuminating figures that danced in the chaos. I looked desperately for the glimmer of the doorway, but it had disappeared, consumed by the darkness I had wreaked. And then, something cold clamped around my wrist, a spectral hand, twisted and clawed, with eyes that flickered with a haunting familiarity. As it began to pull me into the depths of the altar, I faced the reflection of my reflection, my own ghastly visage grinning at me with unfathomable glee. "Heavy lies the crown of guilt," it whispered, dragging me closer. And as I felt myself slipping into the maw of despair, I realized with eternal dread that I was no longer just trapped in the shadows, I had become one of them. Before I succumbed, I caught a glimpse of movement through the cloak of shadows, a pulse of light. But as the darkness embraced me fully, drowning out all hope, I couldn't help but wonder who had found the courage to reach into this hell, and maybe, just maybe, they would choose differently. I stood paralyzed in the midst of the chaos, the weight of the chamber pressing down upon me like a leaden shroud. The faces of the lost souls shimmered around the edges of my vision, whispers echoing their eternal lamentations in a grinding cacophony of agony. I felt their sorrow intertwining around me, threading its cold tendrils through my heart, an inexorable connection to each life I had once brushed aside, neglected, or innocently discarded. I was their architect of despair, their unwilling puppeteer commanding shadowy strings. But amidst the swirling darkness and twisted reflections, a profound shift began to unfurl before me. I heard a rift opening, a voice threading through the noise and inky darkness, morphing into something I could barely comprehend. "Join us," it cooed, seductive yet baleful, winding its way into the core of my being, as though the shadows themselves were wrapping around my mind, pulling me deeper into their mire. My chest tightened with an understanding that manifested crystal clear. I had defied the gravity of my own reality, yet remained chained to it, a lost fragment drifting toward inevitable darkness. The visions intensified, an overload of spectral truths skimming across my consciousness like icy waves, each one a reminder of a transgression I struggled to bury in my soul. In the throes of torment, I stumbled toward one of the twinkling candles, desperation coursing through me, as the flickering light illuminated the grotesque murals writ upon the walls. The scenes danced before me, images of lives ensnared, woven together by the threads of suffering unnoticed. With a shuddering breath, I recognized the story of Emily, forever trapped in the recesses of that cursed night, her face contorting with pleading sadness. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, cloaked and wreathed in the heavy fabric of despair. It raised a twisted finger, beckoning. "You think you can save them? What about yourself? You'll join the darkness, become a guardian of their pain." The laughter that followed was cold, echoing in my ears like the tolling of a funeral bell. "No!" I erupted, my voice ripping through the chamber with an intensity fueled by a heartbreaking abandon. "I'll fight this. I will break free." I could feel the grip of the tendrils around my ankles slip, even as the shadows writhed in protest. The cloaked figure stared, a sliver of a malicious grin slicing through the darkness. "You cannot escape what you are, for the darkness is already within you. You welcomed it. You need it." As if to punctuate its words, a horrid crack shattered the air, and the altar erupted with a whirlpool of shadows that surged toward me. I felt myself pulled inward, yearning to merge completely, to surrender to the complete oblivion that tugged at me with insatiable ferocity. "No! I refuse!" I screamed again, my spirit flaring with defiance as I lunged for the flickering candlelight. But even as I grasped the warmth, the shadows pulled tighter, clinging to my limbs, the darkness whispering sweetly in my ears, offering a comforting embrace that promised an end to the torment. Join us. Be a part of the never-ending symphony of despair. Familiar faces rose in my mind, each urging me toward the void, toward the inevitable acceptance of a fate I feared more than death. And then came the recollection of my own reflection, twisted but beckoning. It darted through the haze, bright with a fatal allure. I stumbled forward, caught between the pull of darkness and the flickering light. Could I really save them? Could I really save myself? It was then that recognition struck the faces of the lost. They were not merely specters. They were pieces of me, whispers of choices long made, paths severed, casualties of apathy and cruelty. With every breath, I inhaled their wails of sorrow, and in that moment, their pain intertwined with my own. The reality shifted, overwhelming me with a tempest of emotion and anger. I remembered their stories, how they never got the chance to voice them. My resolve cracked like fragile glass. Raising my voice, I spat out the truth. You think you have me? You think I will be just another shade in your dreadful chorus? I refuse to be part of your torment. The chamber shook, reverberating with the force of my declaration, as shadows pulled back, recoiling from my defiance. In the moment of clarity, I glimpsed a path through the figures that had once been grotesque. I could now see fragments of clarity emerge, blurring the line between past and present as their faces began to sharpen. With renewed strength, I took a step, breaking the hold of despair with every ounce of courage I had left. The flickering light grew brighter, illuminating the edges of the chamber, until the grotesque visage of the cloaked figure melted away like fog in the dawn. Just as the light engulfed the darkness, flooding every crevice of existence, I could faintly hear a voice, a call echoing from a dark abyss where the booths remained. It wove through the air, and I could swear it was whispering my own name. Welcome home, it sang, but this time the cruel mockery had shifted into a haunting lament imbued with a chilling familiarity. I turned, searching for the voice's source, following the promise of salvation as it twined through the shadows swirling around me. But then a terrifying realization chilled my bones. I had escaped. The ghostly presence wrapped around me tightly, filling every crevice of my mind. The booths lingered just outside the swirling boundary of brightness. I had wrested control from the shadows, yet they were still a part of me, forever intertwining darkness and light. I collapsed, breathless, succumbing to the tide of memories washing over me, flooding me with energy as those familiar faces swirled back into view. But just before I succumbed fully, something primal yanked me back there. At the very heart of the swirling storm lay the glimmering booths, radiant against the shadow, a portal of endless choices, bound tightly to my own fate. In a final surge, a terrifying understanding gripped my heart, as my choices coalesced into a singular realization. I wouldn't just walk away. I could never leave them behind. They were mine to carry. As the light reached its fever crescendo, I dared to wrap my fingers around the booths, feeling the warmth pulse through them, an alluring heartbeat echoing in time with my own. Join us, the call whispered, sweeter and more seductive than any I had ever heard. I bit my lip, and with a raw breath, I stepped forward, feeling the darkness surge alongside me, sealing my fate. And as the shadows surged, a horrific symphony enveloped me, dragging me back into the depths with one chilling final thought coursing through my mind. I had become the very thing I had sought to escape, the booths forever a part of my cursed legacy, echoing in the darkness of eternity. Welcome home, I echoed softly, feeling the sweep of shadows claim me, knowing all too well what lurked below. The laughter returned, a haunting serenade threading through the dark, a reminder that sometimes the disease of darkness was woven too tightly within, a hunger that could never be satiated, a symphony of madness destined to replay on an endless loop.